Welcome. I'll just give you a quick reminder of our code of conduct. Microsoft is dedicated to empowering every person and every organization on the planet. This includes Microsoft Reactor events, where we seek to provide a professional, respectful, and friendly experience for everyone, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, physical appearance, disability, age, race, or religion. We do not tolerate any behavior that is harassing or degrading to any individual in any form. Individuals are responsible for knowing and abiding by these standards. We encourage everyone to assist in creating a welcoming environment and safe environment. With that, I'll turn it over to our speaker today. Welcome, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Molly. And thanks, everybody, for joining. Let me go into my presentation here for you. Just going to click the button and make sure this is showing for you. Looks like it is. Great. So hi, everybody. Welcome. That's me, Mark. I am the lead principal product manager for Data Factory. I focus primarily on Azure Data Factory and Fabric Data Factory on the orchestration and migration side. And today I'm going to talk to you about the evolution of ADF and how to migrate from ADF into Fabric. So what I did was, besides my little picture there, I also put a QR code, which goes to my LinkedIn. And I love to connect with everybody who is interested in hearing more about Data Factory and is also, a Fabric and a Microsoft data user. So anytime at all that you have questions, or if you'd like some follow-up from this, I'm not gonna I have about an hour or so, maybe even a little bit less, and so I'm not going to be able to go into all the details, obviously, of everything. So I'd love to follow up offline, and through LinkedIn is a great way to do that. So please share that, connect with me. And yeah, because we have an amazing community with Microsoft, and I'd love to connect with you all. Okay, so enough of that. Let's dive into what we have today. So I want to start with what is actually Microsoft Fabric. Now, I know this might be going back a bit for some of you who are already using Fabric or know the value of Fabric, but it's very important for us to lay this groundwork. And the reason why I do this is because, Fabric is an evolution, not just of Azure Data Factory, but also for Microsoft in terms of data and analytics and the entire space of Microsoft data all up. And what we intended to do with Fabric, and if I ever get asked, why Fabric, here are the reasons, or just some of the reasons why, right? So I titled this slide as the data platform for the AI era. And, of course, AI is on the tongue of everybody in our industry right now. With that being said, it's super important. And here's why. Because, especially from a Data Factory perspective, you're going to use Data Factory. And I worry about Data Factory and you all as users of Data Factory every day, because you are using it to acquire and shape data. And you do that for the reasons of primarily improving your business outcomes, if you think about the end result, right? And so it's important now to do that, to get value, to get your data into shape for use by AI. Of course, we still have the business analytics, we have BI, all of the downstream consumers still there. And so we made it super easy with Fabric by, first of all, modernizing for AI readiness. All of the ability to do Data Factory and all of Fabric, including SQL, the database, the data warehouse, KQL for Kusto, and all the things that are Azure Data are Copilot enabled as first class inside of Fabric. Now, you're not going to see that in Azure Data Factory or the Azure products. We're not backporting those capabilities. Then also notice on the slide I put MCP, right? The ability to have that endpoint that you can use from your own agents that you build or your own code that you build. If you're using Visual Studio, using it with GitHub Copilot, which I hope you are, because it's an amazing capability. You can just plug into the MCP and you can automate and you can use AI directly through your own agents against Fabric. We have, in fact, a Data Factory MCP as well as the Fabric MCP. All right, let's move on from AI and let's talk about the other areas that are going to be very important for you to use Fabric and Fabric Data Factory. The next one is predictable budgeting. So I'm going left to right across the top here. And with predictable budgeting, what that means is, for those of you who are using Azure Data Factory today or Synapse or have been in the past, first I want to say thank you so much for being our customer. And secondly, I want to say that as a product manager, I spend the vast majority of my time listening to you all as customers. And one of the things that resonated with me, because it was a clear signal, was that the utility-based pricing of Azure can create the problem, I would say, or the challenge of your budget that you spend on Data Factory or Azure can be variable from month to month. And it makes it very difficult to have longer term budgeting plans in place that meet that, because then you end up essentially always accounting for the worst case scenario and sometimes over budgeting or over provisioning. It's much easier to control that inside of Fabric because we use the capacity model such that you buy a capacity and you get that capacity every month in that same budget for it. Let me go down to the bottom row now, because these are super important as well. Reduced complexity is one of the primary reasons for Fabric. And when I talk about all these areas of Fabric and Fabric Data Factory, I'd really like for you to have the takeaway of saying to yourself is that when I'm going to build a new data integration ETL project, because at the end of the day, that's what Data Factory really is, right? Data Factory is that world-class data integration and ETL tool. When I think about building a new project in Microsoft using Data Factory, I'm going to use Fabric Data Factory. And another reason to do that is because we reduce complexity. Within Azure, you have to go to the Azure portal, spin up the resource groups, and then you probably have to connect through managed identities, connect the different systems. And we make that super simple inside of Fabric. We don't need to do all that. In fact, the default in Fabric is that you are connected to things through user auth. Now, you probably don't want to always go into production using user auth, so we make managed identity super easy by having built-in workspace identities, right? Everything in Fabric you're going to see is anchored around a workspace. So I think that pretty much hits the reduced complexity. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say on that. I think not necessarily, but the point is that when you build a new project in Fabric, you should be able to get from starting point to a value solution in much less time, because it's based on essentially what was just Power BI. Now Power BI includes all of the Azure data products. That's a really good way, by the way, to mentally think about what Fabric actually is, which also I hope helps you understand just how easy it is to start building data solutions inside of Fabric. Lastly, I already actually touched on this a little bit. I got ahead of myself, but the accelerating your time to value was a key thing that we thought about, and we still think about a lot on the Fabric team. And I do mention on here is, of course, the Git and CI/CD, which I think is super important. When you're coming from, let's say, Synapse or even ADF, either one of those, into Fabric, I feel, and I'm pretty convicted about this, that the CI/CD is much easier to use inside of Fabric. And why is that? That's because the mechanism of CI/CD within Synapse and ADF is based on ARM templates. And again, that ARM, the Azure Resource Manager, is complexity of Azure PaaS services, which ADF is, right? Azure Data Factory is a PaaS service. It is an artifact of PaaS services, the ARM templates are, that you don't have in Fabric. We don't use ARM in Fabric for the most part. So what that means is that your CI/CD is much more granular. So to be able to cherry pick parts of your workspace or just specific pipelines, and then to be able to move those from dev test to prod, it's super easy, built into the product from day one inside of Fabric. If you've ever tried to do that with an entire ARM template or with ADF, you'll know some of the pain that has caused you all. And first, I want to apologize for that pain, but we wanted to make it better, and we did in Fabric. So that's why I'm really encouraging you to come to Fabric for your data integration projects going forward. So let's take Data Factory that you know and love in ADF. If you're not using it in Fabric today, that's okay. I'm going to help you to get there and help you understand why. After my coffee, I'm getting even better at being able to remember what to say now. So let's take that Data Factory and let's put it into the Fabric frame and see how that looks. And this is exactly what we did when we put Data Factory into Fabric. We took ADF and we didn't rewrite it. So you're going to be super comfortable in it. It's going to look and feel nearly identical, and it makes migrations really easy. Now, the key thing that we're showing you on this slide is that Data Factory, of course, this has already been there, right? Unification of your data, transform your data, orchestrate those processes. That's bread and butter. What's different about Fabric Data Factory versus Azure Data Factory is that it sits on top of OneLake. OneLake is that data store for everything, all of your data inside of Fabric, and you get those per workspace. And the idea is to land all your data in there in a raw or bronze layer as quickly as you can. And stay tuned for some things I'm going to talk to you about that are new in Fabric Data Factory that allow you to do that at super low cost. That's going to save you money when you come into Fabric Data Factory versus using ADF. Okay, the rest of the ecosystem that you see is not very different at all from ADF, right? Any data source, any data destination. And one of the key things I want to talk about today as we make it through the slides, I'll come to it in just a second, is that idea of being able to take any data and put your data anywhere doesn't change with Fabric Data Factory. Just because we retrofitted ADF to fit inside of Fabric does not mean that you need to put your data in OneLake. All right, I'm just giving you the value of it all being in a single place, in a single workspace for you is a good advantage, but not something you have to do. I want to take a quick second because I love to celebrate this. I've been on the Data Factory team for 10 years, so I've been there since V1 of ADF. And now that we have evolved that, remember, part of the big topic or takeaway from today is not just how to migrate, but also the evolution of Data Factory. We evolved from V1 back in 2015, to V2, which we launched, and I think that was around 2017, to adding Dataflows, to adding Airflow and all those things, and coming up into Synapse, and now we're in Fabric, and Fabric is our new evolution of ADF. But what that means is that we've been labeled as a leader within the Gartner Magic Quadrant for many years now within the data integration space, and we're only getting better, and I have high hopes for where we're going to land this year as well. Just like to celebrate that because I think it shows the amazing power and value that you get out of using Data Factory for your data integration. All right, now I wanted to come back to that point I was just making a second ago, which is that the ETL capabilities that you have with Data Factory, even when you're in Fabric using Fabric capacities in your workspace to run your data integration, does not lock you in to Fabric only. We still have over 170 connectors that we use to connect on the source side and on the destination side. In addition to that, we even bring open source into Fabric Data Factory. We did a little bit of this in ADF, but we've deprecated Airflow, for example, and we've also brought DBT into Fabric Data Factory for your SQL-based data transformations. And we also brought Airflow back into Fabric, and that is now generally available. So you get best-in-class ETL, not just our low-code, no-code pipelines and Dataflows. In fact, also, I should say we've made Dataflows even better inside of Fabric. We took the Power Query style interface, which is super easy to use and to get to value very quickly. And we put that on top of the Fabric Compute to be able to run your Dataflows super fast as well. So the no workload dependency in the middle of this chart is very important because this is what I was saying earlier, where even though we built it on the Power BI platform, essentially Fabric, Data Factory lives as it did in Azure Data Factory inside of Fabric. So you don't need to use Synapse Data Warehouse. You don't need to use Fabric. It's all independent of that. And I already mentioned the right-hand side, which is OneLake is there, super powerful, great place to put your data when you're building a medallion architecture in Fabric. However, it's not necessary to use it. So if you have your data sitting in AWS and you want to put it into Snowflake, you can absolutely use Fabric. You can use all of the adjacent capabilities of Fabric and still use Data Factory pipelines to be able to build those data integration workloads. Now, super important to talk about this, which is that in the evolution of Data Factory, we currently have ADF on the PaaS and Azure side, and now we have Fabric Data Factory on the SaaS side within Power BI. And Fabric Data Factory is our core key direction of what we are doing inside of Data Factory and the Data Factory team. If I didn't mention it too clearly at the outset, maybe I should have been a little more clear, just so everybody knows that, on the Data Factory team, which I am on, we are in the Azure Data organization. And so it's very important for us to make sure that we have a roadmap that is going to add all these amazing innovations. And what I'm showing you on the slide is a list of those innovations that we brought to market this year so far. This is just this year, and today when I'm talking to you is May of 2026. Our investments And data integration is one of the biggest areas that we invest in within Microsoft Data, Azure Data. And we are putting those innovations inside of Fabric Data Factory. Those are not going into ADF. We are investing in and innovating in Fabric Data Factory. So it's really important to take away from this is these amazing things that we're bringing. And I even put some Easter eggs in here. I put some things that are coming soon that you can have a look at that I don't mind telling you about now, because I think it's super important for anybody who's interested in Data Factory and uses Data Factory to know about this direction. And what this also means is that not only are we putting a lot of effort into Fabric Data Factory, but we're also doing a lot of things to make sure that what is in Fabric Data Factory is completely up to par and plus on top of ADF. So you'll see some things on this list that are sort of things that are catching up on Fabric to ADF, things like the tumbling window triggers. And that is now there in Fabric Data Factory as the interval-based schedule. Let's see, if I look at this list, I'll see the SSIS activity is there now inside of Fabric. And that is something that's been in ADF for a long time too. Now that's there inside of Fabric. Now we're at the point where you're seeing the value adds put the whipped cream and the cherry on top of Fabric Data Factory, including the AI modernization and investments on the right-hand side, which I talked a lot about earlier. But the other things are on this list, things like being able to refresh your materialized lake views. Super important capability within the lakehouse inside of Fabric is the materialized view. And now we're putting out there an activity within the pipeline that allows you to refresh that materialized view, or the ability to run maintenance activities on your lakehouse, things like vacuum and optimize. That's already there as well. So we continue to innovate in this area. You also see the airflow areas that we're investing in. And so airflow, of course, is that ability to do the orchestration, just like the pipelines, like I mentioned just a second ago. However, the pipelines are the design first, the code-free pipelines that you've been using in ADF and Synapse for years. But they are the code-first version of that, essentially the Python-based DAGs that you build for your orchestration. And that's, of course, built on top of the Apache Airflow open source project. And what's really important about that, by the way, I just want to say one more word on that, is that we also incorporated built-in providers and connectors to all of the things inside of Fabric, so you can orchestrate your notebooks and copy jobs and pipelines even from Airflow just with a right-click action. Super powerful. One more thing on the AI on the right-hand side. I listed out a few things that just recently went GA or that we added into our general AI capabilities in Data Factory and Fabric. Super important to talk about the AI transforms in the pipeline expressions. Those are the kinds of things that will have that time to value increase that you get in Fabric even better, right? That's a force multiplier for you. When you are building pipelines or data flows for that matter, if you're not super comfortable with M, if you need to get into underneath the Power Query UI for your data transformations, or when you're building dynamic pipelines and need to build expressions, you don't need to swivel chair over to Bing or Google to be able to look up those expressions anymore. Just use natural language and say, you know what, Fabric, Data Factory, I want to proper case this entire column, or I want to add a parameter to this copy activity that goes into my metastore and looks up from a database the name of the table that I want to connect to. Just type that in, and Copilot will accurately and correctly build the expressions for you. Super, super powerful. Something you should absolutely try out inside of Fabric. Okay, great. So that lays the groundwork in terms of where we are investing, how important data integration is to us within the Fabric and Microsoft team all up. Let's talk a little bit about the price and performance that you're going to get in Fabric. And we intended to make this the same or better than ADF in Azure. First, very super important to know that there are ways that you can use capabilities inside of Fabric to lower your costs. Now, these efficiencies that you're going to gain will lower your costs inside of Fabric Data Factory. I do want to point out that this does mean that existing things that you have as you're migrating, sorry about that. When you're migrating, you will need to think about how are you going to rework some of these pipelines or these projects to take advantage of these things. But here they are, right? First of all, of course, as you move and you migrate, and I'll show you the migrate capability in just a bit, so hang with me, you will have less duplication, and Fabric will also give you the ability to do things like replication and be able to do CDC super easy. CDC was an ADF, but we never went generally available with that, and it's GA inside of what's known as the copy job inside of Fabric. So as you're moving from ADF and Synapse to Fabric, I highly recommend that you look at two specific data movement areas. I mentioned one of them on the slide. I probably should have mentioned the other, but I'll just say them to you. First, on the top right-hand side, I talk about mirroring. Mirroring is a way to get data from many, many different sources, land it into Fabric OneLake, super easy, fast, and inexpensively. In fact, we don't charge you for the compute to do that at all. And that replication is something that's always running, continuously looking at changed data on your sources and lands that inside of Fabric for you. The second is the copy job. The copy job allows you to simplify your copy pipelines. So here's a pattern that I've seen from you all over the years as customers of Data Factory that's been tried and true, and that is that you use the copy activity or the copy wizard, for that matter, use the copy data a lot to move data. But sometimes those pipelines are just a simple one activity sort of pipeline without really using a lot of the control flow or dependency mapping inside of pipelines. Well, we have the copy job now inside of Fabric that allows you to essentially just pick and choose your destination and your source tables and data and folders, and that's it. You just go. And you actually can tell Data Factory and Fabric how often do you want that to be updated, and do you want that to be CDC or incremental? Built in, and you don't even need a pipeline to do it. So super important areas to look at as you are moving to Fabric. All right, I think I mentioned this one earlier, so I'm not going to spend much time here, but the way to think about your costs inside of Fabric is so much easier to manage because you can manage the capacities that you buy. Those capacities that you have within Fabric when you're running Data Factory, they can be shared and used by the other workloads too. So it gives you that predictability of your cost month over month. And that's, of course, in that is when compared to Azure with variable cost. It's much more predictable pattern. Now, I mentioned mirroring earlier, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but as you look at your pipelines, when you're migrating those, it's going to be very beneficial for you to think about moving some of that into mirroring. Now, a couple things about mirroring I do want to point out. It is no cost ingestion and replication, like I mentioned, and it does have multiple sources. It doesn't have yet all of the sources that we have, but we are building more sources. The reason why it's going to not be all the sources is because it does rely on the ability to pick up change data from those sources. And it's one-way mirroring, right? It's only going to replicate the data into OneLake. So you don't have that flexibility of different destinations or syncs like you do in ADF, but it's super low cost and it gets that data into raw, into bronze, right? And now you can build your data projects from that data as it sits inside of raw. Yeah, but if you want that flexibility of CDC, that's when you're going to use the copy job. Let's shift gears from the data acquisition, data movement into Dataflows. So Dataflows is data transformation, and we, of course, have this in Synapse and ADF. It's very different, though, from Dataflows inside Fabric. And I've got some really interesting news to share with you today about that, too. So the Dataflows inside of ADF are built upon Spark. And they have that construction graph design modality. But what we did inside of Fabric was we said, we can make this easier and better. And so we brought in Power Query-based Dataflows, which use the Power Query UI to allow you to provide your intent for your data transformation. But not only did we do that, we call those, by the way, the Power Query-based Dataflows that came from Power BI. We now call those Gen 1, and the Dataflows that you're going to use inside of Fabric are known as Gen 2. And take a look at some of the performance improvements that we put in there. You don't have to do anything to gain this kind of performance improvement. But what it means is that the Power Query Dataflows that are in Fabric, the Fabric Dataflows, which we call as Dataflows Gen 2, are just naturally better performing, built upon the Fabric infrastructure, built upon Fabric compute. And what this reduction in time to refresh your Dataflow workflows means is that you're going to have a big cost savings with Dataflows inside of Fabric. You'll also be spending less on data transformation than you did in ADF2. So very, very important to look at this. And of course, you add them to your pipelines, just like you do with Dataflows and ADF, and you can build complex orchestration around those. Now, let's talk about how we evolved from ADF. And what I want to hit on here is some of those key value props I talked about earlier, and how you'll look at those and how they're not going to be available to you in ADF. We're not backporting any of these copilots. The copilots are built in directly there to help you get your time to value reduced. You're going to go from the time that you sit in your chair and start building your data factory projects to the time that the business is seeing true business value and better outcomes. In this case, this is looking at how you use Copilot built into those Power Query-based data flows, the Dataflows Gen 2 that I mentioned earlier. You can use this. You can use AI transformations inside of your Dataflow steps, and this is going to make it so much easier and faster to get your data into shape for AI or for your business in general. Look at what you can do with pipelines. With pipelines, you can use Gen AI for your pipelines. You can also use Gen AI for your pipeline expressions. So if you're like me, and I've been in the Data Factory team for 10 years, I still get to the point to where when I am writing pipeline expressions, I have to validate those. I always have to look into maybe a cheat sheet or online for the proper syntax and grammar for those expressions. Now I just say to Copilot, I do something like I have on the screen here, which is update all the activity timeouts to 5 minutes and retry to 3. Or I think even a better example is one that is on the screen right below it, which is concatenate strings, format the date. This can reduce your time to complete a pipeline by 40%. It makes pipeline creation speeds about 3x faster when using Copilot. And we've measured that by looking at the time it takes to complete a task inside of Fabric Data Factory, much faster inside of Fabric than it is in ADF. Now, on the AI side, this is more value that you're not going to have in ADF. We're not going to be able to backport these things into Azure. And that is that you can also use data agents. So as you put your data into OneLake and you're using the capabilities of Fabric, like Data Factory, now you have access to all that data in one place, and now you have the ability to build Fabric data agents. In fact, there's a whole area built for IQ inside of Fabric, known as Fabric IQ, where you could ask questions of your data and get answers really super fast. So I'm going to hit on mirroring one more time for you because I want to reiterate that you can really reduce your TCO. And the reason why I want to talk about mirroring here is because there is an adjacent capability to mirroring, which is very similar, which I want you to be aware of. And that's on the next slide, which is known as shortcuts. So shortcuts and mirroring live kind of side by side within that same headspace, if you will, of getting at your data from Fabric that is external to Fabric very fast and with no to low cost. Now, mirroring is replicating your external data into OneLake. It's actually a copy of it. But you can also use shortcuts, which actually just essentially bridges or connects into your external data and allows you to access it directly from areas like Data Factory or Spark or your warehouse. So as you're running commands and you're running queries and you are wanting to either add to your existing data from something external, or if that's your primary source of data, that's fine. You can use those external connections through shortcuts to get to that data. The other option, of course, is mirroring that will actually replicate it. And this is what I mentioned earlier about the differences in some of the connectors that you'll see from mirroring versus the full copy-based data movement inside of Fabric. And that's because these are going to be connectors that do support change data capture. So here we go. So I want to make sure that we touch on copy job. Copy job, if you've used copy activity in the past, in fact, I would say if you've used ADF or Synapse pipelines in the past, the chances that you haven't used copy are super slim. But copy activity can be a little bit complicated and a little bit sort of imposing because It has a lot of dials and knobs. But what we did is we simplified that. We pulled back on it. And we said, what if you are really just here to move data within our platform? We want to make that super simple to be able to do that. And so within Data Factory and Fabric, we introduced the copy job. The copy job takes the copy activity, it pulls it out of pipelines. And it's something that is a first-class citizen in the workspace inside of Fabric. You can just go into Fabric and say, create a copy job, because I just want to move data. And no pipeline needed. You just pick your sources here. You pick your destination, map your columns if you need to, and then you tell it how often you want to run it, and you want to run it using incremental data. So it has the full power of the pipeline-based copy activity with the ease of use of Fabric. And so I highly recommend that you look at copy job as you migrate in from ADF. All right, one more slide on Apache Airflow. I mentioned Airflow earlier. Now, when you are orchestrating the things that you've built inside of Fabric, that's what Data Factory is there for. We have had pipelines since day one, day zero even, of ADF. And of course, that is a low-code, no-code way to build a graph of your actions that you want to run inside of your pipelines. But if you want to do more of a code-based way to stamp out a lot of orchestrations, and you're more comfortable writing code, then Airflow is your way to go. And we fully support this. It's GA inside of Fabric. It is generally available. And it's also built in with Copilot. So when you go to build an Airflow orchestration, you may find it actually easier and faster in some cases than using a UI to build your pipeline. And the capabilities of running your Fabric items are built in. In fact, we have a UI inside of Fabric for Airflow that is a code editor for Python, which is, Airflow is expressed as Python. And you can right-click inside the UI and you can say, run an item, run a notebook, run a pipeline, and it'll put the code in there for you. I don't have time to show you a demo on this today, but you can actually build an entire set of orchestrations without writing any code. Natural language will do all that for you inside of Fabric Airflow. And then on the one more piece of the open source story that we have inside of Fabric is that we have brought DBT into Fabric Data Factory. DBT is the standard for SQL data transformations, and it's used by a lot of practitioners and data engineers and what DBT calls analytical engineers. It has a very large community, and this is now built into Fabric as a first-class citizen. So if you want to transform your data as code, I highly recommend that you look at DBT. We are going to be adding a lot more to this. This has the same sort of UI for the code capability that Apache Airflow inside of Fabric has. And so you can also use it as a way to transform your data. If you're not using notebooks, you're not using Dataflows, you can use DBT. Okay, shifting gears. So I shouldn't say shifting gears because we're still in the data transformation area. But going back to, is what I meant to say, going back to what I mentioned earlier with Dataflows. So we have the Spark-based Dataflows called mapping Dataflows inside of ADF. We have the Power Query-based Gen 2, the really super fast version of those Power Query-based Dataflows inside of Fabric. And then we have DBT, that I just mentioned, for SQL code-based data transformations. Well, now what we've done is we've brought that capability to you inside of Fabric as well, that capability being the mapping Dataflow Spark-based transformations. Those are coming into Fabric, and they will actually even migrate. So now you can migrate in totality your pipelines, even when they have mapping data flows in ADF and Synapse. So we're calling these Spark transforms, and it's going to live inside of Dataflows Gen 2 inside of Fabric. So it gives you that low code, that same construction graph that I mentioned earlier from ADF and Synapse. By the way, I have a demo on this, so just hang in there. I'm going to play it in just a minute. And it gives you that ability to unify inside of Fabric Data Factory. So we want to make sure that if you're using mapping data flows in ADF and Synapse, we can keep you whole and have you come in to build those complex joins and aggregations and schema shaping now inside of Fabric. And so essentially MDF, mapping data flows, is coming into Fabric as Spark transforms, is going to live inside of Dataflows Gen 2. So I think rather than just kind of talk through all the bullet points on the slide, I'm going to instead show a demo here. I think this demo is about 4 minutes long. And we just put this together So I think this is going to give you a good idea of what this is going to look like inside of Fabric. So let's go ahead and play this. And Molly, just let me know if things don't
Spark
check well.
Transforms in Dataflow Gen 2 brings the low-code Spark-powered capabilities of ADF and Synapse mapping data flows into Microsoft Fabric, enabling you to visually build and run scalable Spark transformations natively within Fabric Dataflow Gen 2. In this demo, we will create and run a Spark transform in Dataflow Gen 2. We will ingest orders data from ADLS Gen 2 and customers data from Azure SQL database, join them, and then write the enriched output back to ADLS Gen 2. I'll start from the Fabric workspace and create a new Dataflow Gen 2 item. Once the Dataflow Gen 2 canvas opens, I can launch Spark transforms either from the...
I want to pause here for a second because I want to make sure that we that this groks for you all. You saw that in the Fabric workspace now, Krishna, who built this video for us, is an amazing product manager that we have on the team. What he did was he went and built a new Dataflow Gen 2. I've been talking a lot about that today, Dataflows Gen 2 inside of Fabric. And so it's the same UI that you have for Power Query inside of Fabric, and it's the Dataflow Gen 2. So he's not building something called Spark Transforms. He's not building something called Mapping Dataflows. Instead, that capability has been subsumed inside of the UI, inside Dataflows Gen 2. So you see his new action that he's highlighting with this pointer. It's called Run Spark Transforms.
ribbon or directly from the canvas style. First, I'll enable Dataflow debug for interactive authoring and data preview.
So now see how the UI is switched from that Power Query UI and the essentially the sheet that we have about seeing the data, that kind of that data first orientation that you can also have within the Power Query based data flows. Now it's switched to the construction canvas, the construction graph that you have from ADF.
Now we will start by adding the source. I'll add the order source from ADLS Gen 2. And then add the customer source from the Azure SQL database by selecting the connection and browsing the table.
So I'm going to probably forward through some of this because I don't think you need to see the whole thing, but I just want to point something out as you're watching. If you're coming from ADF and Synapse and you've used data flows there, this should be super natural for you. There's no change in the UI here. It just is inside of this shell. The other thing I want to point out is the reason why you would do the Spark transforms inside of Dataflow Gen 2 is if you need that scale or that complexity that maybe you can't get out of the Power Query based UI or the compute that it's running on, which is essentially the warehouse compute. You can absolutely just do this inside of your Dataflows Gen 2 inside of Fabric.
Next, I will add the join transformation to combine the orders with customer table and prepare the enriched order table. Finally,
so let me forward to the, let me go to this point where you can see that it's running from a Python, because I think the rest is just essentially building the data flow out. But let's play this part. So now you can see that you just added Dataflow, which is the Dataflow Gen 2.
Pane, I can select the Dataflow Gen 2 item along with the Spark transform query that I would want to execute. I can also configure Spark runtime settings directly.
Yeah, so here's the really cool thing, right? So if you've used these data flows from ADF in the past, and by the way, I do, Carlos, see your note, but when I tried to click over to answer the comments, that's when the video stopped. So I'll get to the comments in a second. We should have time at the end too, by the way. So my point being here is that if you come from ADF or Synapse and you've built these data flows before, even the ability to set the Synapse, in this case it was Synapse Spark, and we're moving this over into Fabric Spark, but to set the Spark core counts and the size of the Spark compute that you want, that's all here. So now you can run these transforms on Spark at Spark scale just by setting the size and the number of cores that you want to run it on. This is a pipeline setting. So you build your data flow inside of the Dataflow Gen 2. We call them Spark transforms. It's essentially mapping data flows. And then you add it to your pipeline and you set the size of the compute you want to use.
Pipeline experience. Finally, I will trigger the pipeline execution.
Okay, let me leave it there because I think you pretty much got the point out of that. So as you look to migrate into Fabric, you will have all those capabilities, including mapping data flows. We are not leaving anything out. We're making the migration super easy. I mentioned this earlier. Yeah, I think I'm good on time, because what I want to do is I want to save a little bit of time to answer your questions at the end. So please keep popping your questions into the comments. I promise to have a look at those at the end. Let me come back to what I mentioned earlier, which is the CI/CD, the DevOps capabilities in Fabric. I feel are much improved over ADF. Not only can you bring your own external Gits like you can with ADF and Synapse, but Fabric also supports a built-in capability called deployment pipelines. One thing I do want to mention is that as you are using DevOps inside of Fabric, it's very important to be familiar with what's known as variable libraries. Variable libraries is a workspace capability inside of Fabric that is fully supported by all the areas inside of Data Factory Fabric, including pipelines, data flows, airflow, etc. That will let you set variable settings that can change as you move your code from dev to test to prod. Very important to do things like have a connection that is different for dev, test, and prod, or just any value that you read or use inside of your expressions. You can set use variable libraries. That's essentially a way to change your values as you move from stages inside of your DevOps. All these new activities, this is even just a partial list of new activities. You saw the list of all the investments we make in Fabric Data Factory. These are not being backported. So it's important for you to build your new projects as well, not just migrate, but also your new projects in Fabric Data Factory rather than ADF, so that you can get the email activity and the Teams activity and the refresh semantic model activity. By the way, you all, again, amazing customers, and thank you so much for using ADF. And I've heard over the years a lot to be able to do things like refresh a semantic model, send an email, send a Teams notification. All that now is there. We built it all for you. It's in Fabric Data Factory. That's the place to go. And so the last, I saved the best for last, and that is, how do you migrate then? Okay, Mark, this is great, but I have my things in ADF and Synapse. How do I get over there? I'm going to play another demo in just a minute. This one's a little bit shorter, so it should be right on time. But I do want you to know that in all of the surface areas of Data Factory, ADF, Synapse, and Fabric, there is a migrate button. So you'll see the migrate button in the demo that's going to come from ADF. It's in the same spot in Synapse as it is in ADF, and we even have added it now into Fabric. That can be your starting point to say, bring in all of my pipelines, and we will do it for you. So rather than read through the slide, I'm going to have Shireen, another amazing PM on our team, who she does an amazing job in these videos, is going to walk you through an end-to-end, including one thing I forgot to mention. Oh, actually, I apologize, I did mention earlier, which is that we are ensuring that we've brought everything from ADF into Synapse into Fabric. Thank you. Everything from ADF and Synapse into Fabric. So that includes the data flows, but also includes SSIS. So that is also there now inside of Fabric. So all those things that you have in ADF will be available to you in Fabric. That's a promise that we make. It's a product promise that we have for you. Let me show it to you in the demo. Here we go.
Let's start in Azure Data Factory. Here, I have my pipelines, data flows, data sets all here. I'll click the Migrate to Fabric icon, and right away Fabric analyzes my factory, pipelines, data sets, and data flows, and identifies anything that may need review. This is the easy go fast button we're talking about. You'll see items like global variables or legacy data flows that aren't Fabric ready yet. But here's the key. None of this blocks migration. I'll hit Continue in Fabric, and Fabric mounts my existing ADF as an Azure Data Factory item inside my Fabric workspace. That means my ADF workloads continue running in Azure, and I can view and operate them directly from Fabric, no big bang cutover. Next, Fabric analyzes my link services and auto-creates Fabric connections. For the ones Fabric can infer, I simply map them manually. Once connections are mapped, everything downstream just works. Then I'll choose a folder where Fabric should place the modernized items. Then click Migrate. Fabric rebuilds each pipeline as a native Fabric pipeline using the new architecture. Inside my migrations folder, I see now all my pipelines, fully native, fully Fabric. Every activity, every connection, every configuration preserved. But another thing every Data Factory customer asks is, what happens to my existing SSIS? For customers running SSIS today, this is a big moment. SSIS support in Fabric is available starting today at FabCon with the new SSIS activity and data pipelines. SSIS is first class in Fabric, running alongside pipelines, governance, and the same orchestration layer customers already trust. This means you don't have to rewrite proven integrations just to modernize your platform. Let's go ahead and run this pipeline in Fabric. And just after a few short moments, the mounted pipeline executes successfully, even my new SSIS activity. But there's one more question every ADF customer asks. What about my mapping data flows? Let's answer that. This is where the full migration story completes. What you're seeing here is mapping data flows in Fabric. I'll go ahead and click on the Migrate to Fabric button again, and let's migrate only the mapping data flow. I'll do the same thing I did before and map the connections, and that's it. The same visual transformation experience customers already know, now brought into the Fabric workspace. We can also run this data flow in Fabric, and you can see that your existing mapping data flows continue to run exactly as they do today, executed in Azure, but now orchestrated, monitored, and managed directly from Fabric. Now that my data integration lives in Fabric, I'm not just moving data anymore. I can immediately connect it to analytics by adding a semantic model activity directly into the pipeline, something that isn't available in Azure Data Factory or Synapse. Fabric automatically understands my data, relationships, measures, and business logic, and turns it into a governed semantic model, a single reusable definition of the business shared across workloads. And because this is Fabric, the semantic model lights up in Power BI instantly. This is why we make migration easy. Once you're in Fabric, everything connects and analytics just works.
All right, so I'm going to stop it there. Another great demo, and I think I have one more thing I want to show you before we're done. Look at that, I made it through all the slides on time. So Molly, I'm going to switch screens here. So I'm going to do this, and then I think I click this, share screen window. Give me 1 second, everybody, and then I'll get to your questions. So if I say the screen, you should see in a second my workspace in Fabric. All right, it's beautiful. So Shireen did an amazing job of showing you the easy button for migration ADF. By the way, I highly recommend that when you're all done watching this, that the first thing you do is go and click that button. So go and click that button because a couple of things. One is there's no cost to it. Two is it's super lightweight. And three is that it will initially show you an assessment. So at least get to the assessment point to know about your existing ADF and Synapse readiness for migration. It will tell you things like this needs you to look at something, this is not compatible, and those sorts of things. By the way, if you do see a not compatible, rest assured that that will turn green over time. We are absolutely working day and night to make everything compatible from ADF into Fabric. Now, let me show you what we didn't get to in the demo video, because you saw the video actually even mentioned, you might have heard this, it said that it mentioned that SSIS was available at FabCon. It's a little bit of a dated video. We also brought the migration into Fabric. So here I am in my Fabric workspace. If I click on the migrate button, you get this whole set of migration capabilities. So as you're migrating things from Azure and Synapse, Data Factory team, we're not the only ones doing this, right? All of your other capabilities that you use from Microsoft Azure Data are going to be having migration capabilities here too. But here's the Data Factory one. Just click on Data Factory. We will go and discover all of the Data Factories you have access to. I'm going to pick a specific one that I have, which is this one here, and I'm going to click OK. This is all you do. Just click OK, and we will do what's known as mounting. Mounting will take Fabric, the workspace, and we'll put a pointer to your existing ADF. It doesn't move anything. It just gives you that direct access of your Data Factory inside the Fabric workspace. And you see on the right-hand side, the readiness to migrate, your assessment comes up right away. And I have 39 of 47 pipelines that are ready to migrate. And I have some that are not. So it leaves those off, the ones that are not. And you can just pick and choose, right? If you're not ready for everything, just pick, maybe one or another one. And then as you do that, what it will do is it will try to automatically build those connections. So when you're coming from ADF and Synapse, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that link services are the connectors that you, essentially the name of the definition of the connectors that you use inside of ADF and Synapse. In Fabric, they're known as connections. And so we do that mapping for you when we can. If not, you can manually map those right here, and we'll let you do that here. And then after that, you just go ahead and click confirm, and then it does the rest, and that's it. So very super easy. I highly encourage you to do that. I'm going to, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing because that is it for my material. And Carlos had mentioned there's some questions. So maybe this is a good chance to answer questions. Or if you had some things you wanted to come back on and talk to the audience about, you can do that too. And I can kind of go through these and maybe just kind of read them off as I go. Let's see what we got. All right, so when creating OneLake shortcuts in Microsoft Fabric, points to manage Delta tables, Databricks governed by Unity Catalog, we found the Unity Catalog exposes physical storage paths using internal IDs that a readable catalog. This is a long one. Schema table names. What is the, oh, thank you for putting that up. What is the recommended way to support this scenario with Unity Catalog managed tables? And actually, I don't have the answer for that one. That's a tough one. I would actually have to point you to a different team, the OneLake team on that one. So what we can do is maybe I can work with Molly or Carlos, and we can have a follow-up with you on that one. That one I do not have an answer on in terms of how to do that from shortcuts. The next one is it possible to create ADF to FDF JSON convert utility with 100% accuracy even for complex ADF pipelines? So we do that for you. That tool that I just showed you is an easy button inside the UI and does all that for you. But you can absolutely use a JSON converter. You can use public LLMs will do that for you. Claude is probably the best to do that. Copilot does a really good job as well. I didn't have great success with ChatGPT, but you can absolutely use those and convert on your own if you'd rather. But our tool does a lot of that for you, including the mapping of the connections and the auto creation of connections as well. Next one I see is how do we use Lakehouse maintenance activity for multiple tables? Currently, it supports only single table selection. What if we have 50 plus tables? You know, I see that question. I actually did not think about that. I didn't realize that. So let me take a look at that offline. And remember, I gave you all my LinkedIn earlier. You can always look me up on LinkedIn if you didn't capture the QR code. And I'm happy to follow up with you all there as well on that one. So if we don't support multiple tables, the way to do that would be essentially use a parameter inside of there and parameterize that table. But that could be a little bit painful. I can see that. I'll look at that offline and see if that is something that we can do, is to add multiple tables. But I do appreciate the feedback on it, that is a scenario that you'd want to do with the Lakehouse maintenance activity. And with that, I think I gave a lot of information for you all to hopefully help you understand the evolution of Data Factory, the way we think about the evolution and future of Data Factory within the data integration team. And hopefully you've seen that we made it just super simple for you to do the migration into Fabric. Feedback is always welcome. Use any of our forums. Use the LinkedIn to come get me and see me and connect with me. And I'm happy to help you with Data Factory anytime at all. So Molly, that's all I had for today.